Now, Mr. Speaker, I will continue my remarks following statements by members and a question period. As you said, I've got a number of things left to say. The Honourable Member for Légontique-L'Érable will have 5 minutes remaining in his speech when the House returns to this debate, and another 5 minutes for questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Bécancour-Nicolet-Sorel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the holidays are almost upon us, but for 800 families in the Quebec City region, there's only uncertainty and worry. I'm talking about the Davie shipyard workers who will lose their jobs because of a lack of federal contracts, even though they are the best shipyard in North America. And yet, Davie has successfully delivered on the one and only contract that Ottawa gave it. It is inexplicable to see Davie forced to lay off workers because of a lack of work when Irving, with its $63 billion in federal contracts, has not even delivered a single ship. It is inexplicable to see Davie, that has just delivered a ship at a quarter of Irving's proposed cost, is laying off its workers when the government is forgiving Irving's cost overruns. It is inexplicable, unless this is a concerted effort to obliterate Quebec expertise to the benefit of other provinces. And now we're moving from the inexplicable to the unforgivable. Thank you.
Kitchener South Hespeler. Mr. Speaker, I stand today to express my sincere appreciation to all the men and women working days, afternoons, night shifts, 12-hour continental shifts, and weekends. I have great respect for all the workers in manufacturing facilities because I too, Mr. Speaker, have worked on all shifts during my 13 years of experience in manufacturing. I want to thank all the workers in my riding and Waterloo region at places like ATS Automation, Beamer Box, Cober, Cult, Irwin-Heimer, Grand River Foods, Ontario Globe and Safety, Frito-Lay, and Toyota, among many others. I want to take a moment to ask members to join me in saying thank you to all the workers in manufacturing facilities across this country to support their families, themselves, and to provide Canadians with all the manufacturing products that we take for granted in every day in our lives. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to welcome His Beatitude, Louis Raphael Sacco, the Patriarch of Chaldean Catholic Church of Babylon, to Canada. Patriarch Sacco is visiting Canada for installation of new Canadian Eparch Bishop Soro. Christian in Iraq long faced persecution from terrorist groups. Recently, I met with Patriarch of Melkite Catholic Church, who visited my riding of Markham Unionville. I also attended a prayer for peace religious services at St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto to pray for Coptics and other Middle Eastern Christians who are facing persecution. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to stand with my Conservative colleagues to defend religious freedom at home and abroad. I warmly welcome His Beatitude to Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to a constituent of mine, Ian Jones, who passed away on October 16th after a brief illness. I knew Ian as an artist and a photographer. This year, residents have been enjoying Ian's scenes of Scarborough as part of my 2017 calendar. This was a retirement hobby for Ian, who helped mold young minds for 25 years as an elementary school teacher for the Toronto District School Board. His goal was always to inspire and help his pupils feel good about themselves. I plan to honor Ian's community service with a Canada 150 pin, and his wife, Dominic Hemmett Jones, and family were proud to accept it on his behalf. I would like to extend my sincere condolences to Dominic, Ian's mother Grace, his siblings Catherine, Francis, and Anthony, and all of his loved ones. We were blessed to have Ian as part of our Scarborough community.
Honourable Member for the Smithy, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan High Schools Athletic Association volleyball tournaments were held all over the province. I'm happy to stand in the House today to congratulate all our inspiring athletes in Northern Saskatchewan. Among the winners, the boys volleyball team of Island Lake First Nation Ministiquin Reserve won Provincial 1A boys volleyball. The Alacross girls volleyball team won the silver medal. The Lalarche Community Denny High School boys volleyball team won the silver medal. I would also like to congratulate all the parents, coaches, trainers, and school staff on their dedication and the support they bring to young athletes. I'm grateful that they are contributing to health and well-being of our youth, as we know full well that competitive sports bring a sense of confidence and enhance the importance of self-care among youth. To all the athletes and the teams who made it to the tournaments, we are proud of you.
The Honorable Député de Mount Royal.
The Honourable Member for Montréal.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow Canadians from across the country will be meeting with MPs, asking us to decriminalize payment for sperm and egg donors and surrogates. Under the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, intended parents who require assistance to have a child, including cancer patients, infertile couples, and members of the LGBTQ2 community, can be subject to a maximum fine of $500,000 or imprisonment for up to 10 years for simply offering to pay a sperm or gamete donor or surrogate. As a result, many Canadians either lose the opportunity to become parents or are forced to look to jurisdictions such as the United States, where payment to donors and surrogates are legal, but unfortunately health regulations are much looser. I therefore invite my colleagues from all sides of this House to join with me in support of amending the AHRA to stop criminalizing people who just want to love a child of their own.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, last week in question period, the Prime Minister was asked to defend his Sunny Ways plan to bring ISIS fighters back to Canada and hope for the best. What shocked me was the absurdity of his answer. Instead of defending his plan to bring ISIS fighters back to Canada and somehow fix them, he began his response by talking about Muslims and Islam.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I found it hard to believe that the Prime Minister of a multicultural, multi-faith country is unable to differentiate between Muslims and ISIS fighters.
Yes.
I have heard from Canadians across this country who were just as shocked as I was that the Prime Minister could make such an absurd and insulting comparison. I demand that the Prime Minister apologize to Muslims in Canada and in the world for that insulting.
The Honourable Member for Surrey Central.
Mr. Speaker, it is wonderful to be back in Canada's national capital, but I'm also grateful for the opportunity I had to visit Washington, D.C., the capital of our neighbours to the south, earlier this week. Over 4 jam-packed days, members of the Canada-United States Inter-Parliamentary Group met with 62 elected officials from the United States Senate and Congress. It was encouraging to see that many of the issues important to Canadian MPs also matter deeply to our American allies, and we took part in many productive discussions on topics such as NAFTA, trade, and our mutual security. Our visit to Washington was reinforced the notion that Canadians and Americans share far more than just a border, and we look forward to working with all parties in the United States and Canada to build a future that benefits both of our nations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege for me to rise today in this House to honour the Community Volunteer Centre L'Actuel on its 35th anniversary. L'Actuel provides essential resources to the members of my community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges who are the most in need. For 35 years now, the organization has been working with respect, integrity, and dedication in order to improve the daily lives of seniors, adults, and children. I would like to thank the General Director of L'Actuel, Ms. Francine Plamondon, and the volunteers who have worked tirelessly to support the most vulnerable in our community. Over the holidays, as they have done every year since 1982, they will be providing support to members of our community, young and old. Mr. Speaker, today I congratulate L'Actuel for its important work. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend I had the privilege of participating in 3 Christmas parades in Kitchener-Conestoga. The parades, the lights, and the Christmas carols point to Christmas, the time when we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. At Christmas, we're reminded again of the incredible blessings we enjoy in this great country of Canada and to give thanks. Christmas offers us time to reflect on what is truly important in life and to commit to spreading Christ's message of peace and goodwill in our families, in our community, in Canada, and around the world. This Christmas, please join me in praying for those affected by the violence in Iraq, Syria, Myanmar, North Africa, and beyond. And right here at home, remember those who are grieving the loss of a loved one, those suffering debilitating illness, and those who are isolated and lonely. And please, let's remember our brave men and women in uniform defending freedom all around the world whose loved ones will celebrate this Christmas without them. Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
The Honourable Member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, Canada 150 provides us with a unique opportunity to highlight the accomplishments of great Canadians on our ridings. Yesterday, I had the privilege of moderating the Canada 150 Recognition Gala in my riding of Montarville. Please join me in congratulating
Marie Fragasso, Lauriane Beaulieu-Lemay, Benjamin Bernatchez, Jérémy Tremblay, bear with me, Samuel Di Pasquale, Toussaint Riendeau, la troupe de théâtre
Saint-Bruno Players,
Chantal de Serre, le centre de bénévolat Saint-Basile, l'Envolée et les petits bonheurs de Saint-Bruno, Minta, Réal Dubois, Jean-Pierre Renèche, Richard Pelletier, Jean-Luc Dalpé, Richard Grive, Marc Savard et Marcel Babeux. Bravo. Bravo à tous.
Congratulations to all, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your daily involvement in our community.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honour and congratulate 4 Niagara Regional Police officers. 2 weeks ago, I attended a service at Rideau Hall when Constables Daniel Bassey, Jake Braun, Neil Ridley, and Alan Rivet received declarations of bravery from the Governor-General. On October 10th, 2015, Mr. Speaker, these officers subdued an active shooter in Fenwick, Ontario in the Niagara region. While Constable Ridley negotiated with the distraught man, the man suddenly opened fire, hitting both Constables Ridley and Braun. Despite their injuries, the officers, joined by Constables Bassey and Rivet, were able to neutralize the threat, preventing the situation from escalating any further. These officers go to work every day, Mr. Speaker, to protect and defend the most vulnerable within our society, often at great personal costs attributed to them. These men exemplify courage, bravery, and the best Niagara has to offer. I'd like to congratulate Constables Ridley, Braun, Bassey, and Rivet for their declaration of bravery. Thank you for helping to keep Niagara safe.
Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicolet.
Mr. Speaker, recently I've become aware of a disturbing trend. The Canada Revenue Agency has been targeting single parents, most often single mothers, and typically because an ex-spouse has left a relationship with no forwarding address. In response, these single moms are seeing their marital status changed back to married or living common law by the CRA. That in turn can result in their Canada Child Benefit being reduced, stopped, or even clawed back. Essentially, these single mothers are being penalized with the presumption of guilt, while CRA says, prove us wrong. And they don't make that an easy process to fix. Now, I'm asking single parents impacted by this to contact me. With the assistance of the CRA Minister's Office, we have already helped one single mom with 3 kids, and I know there are many more who need our help. I know all members of this House will join me in wanting to resolve this problem for single parents. They and their children deserve our respect, support in fixing this.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure and honour on behalf of all of my colleagues to rise in the House today to acknowledge the visit of Patriarch Louis Raphael Seiko. Patriarch Seiko has come to Canada for the installation of Bishop Bawai Soro at the Good Shepherd Chaldean Cathedral in my riding of Humber River, Black Creek. There are very few moments as meaningful as this for any community, and this installation is a milestone. I was happy to have the opportunity to be present at this momentous occasion to celebrate with all of those in attendance. Canada is committed to the promotion and protection of peaceful pluralism, respect for diversity, and all human rights, including freedom of religion or belief, and that it is an integral part of Canada's engagement in the Middle East and the world. Welcome to all of you to Canada. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, my community is in the midst of a profound housing crisis. Rents are increasing, more people are homeless, and businesses are starting to relocate as their young employees cannot afford to buy their first homes. The government brags about its new national housing strategy, but they're doing nothing to immediately address what is becoming an emergency situation in Burnaby. University of Toronto housing specialist Professor David Hulchansky writes today in the Globe and Mail that the Liberals' newly announced policies will, quote, help very few of those in housing need. He instead suggests we need a, quote, real national housing strategy that would create an inclusive housing system, much like our healthcare system, addressing 1, how to stimulate adequate housing production, 2, how to produce a mix of housing choice, 3, how to assist those who cannot afford adequate housing, and 4, how to address sexism and racism in our housing system. The government needs to start delivering real housing solutions right now, such as guarantee those living in co-ops that they will not increase their rents next year. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after many difficult years, Davie Shipyard's new management has managed a spectacular turnaround since 2012 and has turned this company into a Quebec jewel. Drawing on the expertise of its workers, whom I salute today, the shipyard has successfully refitted and repaired icebreakers such as the Louis Saint Laurent for the Coast Guard. It has delivered the Miko Perry Pride for the private sector and is now delivering the supply ship Astérix on time and at the planned cost for the Canadian Navy. Marc Veilleux said to me one day that the only way to prove that shipyard detractors were wrong was to succeed. And I say to you, mission accomplished. Canada needs you.
The Honourable Member for Quebec-Mactaquac.
Yesterday was the International Day of Persons with a Disability. It aims to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development, and to increase awareness of the situations of persons with a disability. This year's theme is Transformation Towards a Sustainable and Resilient Society for All. À travers...
The goal is to foster environments that allow persons with disabilities to reach their full potential, free of discrimination. That is why last week our government tabled the optional protocol of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We will also be tabling an accessibility bill by the summer. Please join me in highlighting this day and advancing the rights of people with disabilities. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wrote the Minister of Finance, and this is what he said. As Minister, you must ensure that you are aware of and fully compliant with the Conflict of Interest Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Minister was fined by the Ethics Commissioner for not being in compliance with the Ethics Act. I'm wondering, does the Minister realize that he has failed the most basic fundamental of his mandate letter and the expressed desire of the Prime Minister? My question is simple. Why is he still Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague continues on a useless fishing trip that they've been on for a number of weeks. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know and members of this House know that the Minister of Finance, upon assuming office, worked with the Ethics Commissioner proactively to ensure that he was in compliance. He's followed all of our recommendations, and as this House and Canadians know well, Mr. Speaker, he's gone above and beyond that advice and will continue to work with the Ethics Commissioner, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, we support the important work he's doing on behalf of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, if the Ethics Commissioner gave the recommendations to the Minister, why is she now investigating him on 3 different cases? Just days after the Minister of Finance was found to not be in compliance with the Act, the Ethics Commissioner actually opened up yet another investigation. And this time, it had to do with whether or not he should have introduced Bill C-27, specifically since it would have directly benefited his family business. So, Mr. Speaker, again, another investigation, another conflict. How many more investigations must there be for this minister to step aside?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
So, Mr. Speaker, again, my honourable colleague knows that the Minister of Finance, as he always has done, is working with the Ethics Commissioner with respect to this particular circumstance, and will be happy to answer any and all questions she may have. The reason why he's continuing his important work as Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, is because the Canadian economy is growing at a faster rate than it has in a decade, with an average growth of 3.7% over the last 4 quarters. When that member was in the cabinet of the previous Conservative government, she would have loved to have economic results like that.
The honourable member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, well, I can assure you of one thing. The Minister of Finance is going to be answering a lot more questions of the Ethics Commissioners in the coming days, because she now has launched yet another inquiry. This time, she would like to know from the Finance Minister and discuss this timely sale of 680,000 shares in Morneau-Chapelle, which happened on November 30th, because, Mr. Speaker, this actually was a value to the seller of the tune of $500,000. So my question is simple, and I think it's the one that the Ethics Commissioner is going to be asking. Was it his $680,000 shares that were sold on November 30th?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the fishing effort continues. The Minister of Finance has been very clear. As part of the normal compliance upon taking office, he assumed a number of decisions. That is not a surprise to this House. All of that was done in consultation with the Ethics Commissioner. And, Mr. Speaker, why we on this side of the House want the Minister to continue his important work for Canadians is because since taking office, the economy has created more than 600,000 jobs, most of them full-time. Unemployment rate is now at 5.9%, its lowest level in a decade, something that previous party couldn't achieve.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabasca. Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner has asked for yet another meeting with the Finance Minister in order to discuss his conflict of interest situation. Can the Minister of Finance simply tell Canadians if it was he who sold 680,000 shares a few days before the implementation of new fiscal measures that he himself introduced? The question is simple. Now, did he sell these shares in his company? Mr. Speaker, I guess I have the opportunity to repeat to my colleague that the Minister at all times followed the advice of the Ethics Commissioner. And, Mr. Speaker, I think we have to get rid of this idea of mystery around this this piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, it was me who on November 4th, as a government leader in the House, I said we would be back in December to bring this measure in January. The Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabasca. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance was responsible. Canadians should be able to expect that their Finance Minister will be honest, responsible, accountable and transparent. But he was fined for having hidden his villa in France. He's being investigated by the Ethics Commissioner, and he has refused to disclose to Canadians his many numbered companies, and he forgot to place his shares in a blind trust. Now, here's the question everyone's asking. What is the Minister waiting for to resign? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect that the Minister of Finance continue his great work to create employment for the middle class. We have the fastest economic growth in the G7. Mr. Speaker, our economy has created more than 600,000 jobs, most of them full-time. And we have an economic record which, frankly, the Conservative Party would have been proud to have when they were in government. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Neigette-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister still isn't out of the woods. For the third time, he will have to meet with the Ethics Commissioner. The Minister keeps repeating that he's done nothing blameworthy, that he's been following the rules, blah, blah, blah. But if he's done nothing wrong, how can he explain that no one in Parliament has had to spend as much time with the Ethics Commissioner? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance, like all members, and like all members of Cabinet, has assumed his responsibility when he was asked to come and serve in Cabinet. He decided to work with the Commissioner in order to make sure that his affairs were in order and that the guidelines of the Commissioner were followed. The Minister of Finance did this at all times, but Mr. Speaker, the Minister also has a significant responsibility to work to increase economic growth, to improve the lot of all Canadians. He is a remarkable person and he should continue his good work. The Honourable Member.
Working with the Ethics Commissioner doesn't mean the same thing as being under investigation by the Ethics Commissioner. The Finance Minister has responded to criticism with classical Liberal entitlement. He has dismissed the questions asked by the opposition and by journalists, threatening legal actions to those who would even dare to challenge him. Well, the Ethics Commissioner doesn't think these questions are absurd because for the third time she'll be following up with the Finance Minister. How can the Finance Minister stand there and say with a straight face that everything is fine when obviously everything is not fine?
Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague may not want to accept the answer which the Minister of Finance, which the Prime Minister, which our government has given consistently, is that it is the responsibility of all members of this House to work with the Commissioner, as the Minister of Finance did, at all times to ensure that we are in compliance with the rules that are applicable. Now, Mr. Speaker, one thing that this government is focused on is improving the economic condition of middle-class Canadians, and that's why almost 600,000 full-time jobs is an impressive economic record for any government, and certainly one that Canadians should be proud of.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
Who's having a rough time. The Revenue Minister is also in hot water. Not only nobody can find the $25 billion she keeps talking about, but this morning, two diabetes organizations held a press conference saying that either CRA is giving them wrong information or there is a massive lack of communication between the minister and her own agency. Two different stories, same incompetence. Mr. Speaker, does the minister know what she's talking about?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to help improve measures for disabled people in a fair, transparent and accessible way. I was proud to announce the reinstatement of the Advisory Council for Disabled Persons. Now, this committee was ended by the Conservative government. Now, we're trying to enhance the quality and accessibility of services for disabled persons and also for their families. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. 4 weeks now, the Minister has been repeating over and over again that she was able to deal with $27 billion in fiscal avoidance, but we don't know where that is. Mr. Speaker, she's not going to find it in a Cracker Jack box. Now, and the CRA doesn't know what she's talking about. This is unbelievable. Can the Minister make a difference before identifying money and recovering that money? Now, the Minister is saying anything at all, and her own agency doesn't know what she's talking about. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government is firmly committed to putting an end to abusive fiscal practices. We have been recovering things in an effective way and following our investments to make sure that the agency has all necessary tools to deal with fraudulent actions. We did invest money to this end. There have been 2 companies affected and they were advised of changes, and we've also established new premiums that we will be recovering.
Mr. Speaker, last Thursday, the Minister of Finance was asked yet again if he sold his shares in Morneau Chapelle on November 30th, 2015. And here's what he said. I do not know on what exact date those shares were sold. He's also said in the House that he gave the transaction records to a journalist. How is it possible that a journalist knows the date on which he sold the shares, but he doesn't?
Secrétaire parlementaire au ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
United, he's always been clear that he did sell shares when he came to office in November 2015, and I wonder what is he alleging? What's the story there, Mr. Speaker? If he would have read the newspapers this weekend, Mr. Speaker, in the National Post, he would have read, Tories can stop blowing smoke because there's nothing suspicious about the minister's share sell-off. That was in the National Post. I know the member enjoys reading rebel media. He should broaden his horizons. Thank you.
Order. The honourable member for Carleton.
Actually, I enjoy reading the transaction ledgers that show on which date what shares were sold. And there's where I found that the minister appears to have sold his shares on November 30th, 2015. His father sold shares at roughly the same time. They both sold millions of dollars just before the minister introduced tax measures on the floor of the House of Commons. The minister said there's no coordination in this matter between him and his father. Did they use the same stock brokerage firm? Yes or no?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me quote something else I read recently in the papers, the Financial Post this time. The attacks on Morneau's ethics, on the minister's ethics, are beginning to look unethical in and of themselves. That's precisely what the member is doing. It's beginning to look disgraceful to see the Tories engaged again and again in a smear campaign and focusing on everything that doesn't really matter to Canadians, because what Canadians care about are the jobs that we've created, 600,000 in the last 2 years, the fastest growth in the G7, and the minister has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner, will always work with the Ethics Commissioner. Thank you.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, the kindest thing we can say about our millionaire finance minister's conduct in the sale of these shares before he introduced his tax measures is that by selling those shares at that time, he avoided paying the same tax increases that he would impose on others at the end of the month. Unfortunately, low-income people suffering from diabetes don't have access to the same kind of sophisticated tax maneuvers that the minister used. Why is it that this government continues to raise taxes on those with the least while letting the wealthy get off scot-free?
The Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker, our government has pledged to look at measures for disabled persons and to look at them and make them transparent, accessible, and fair. We reinstated the Advisory Committee on Disabled Persons. Mr. Speaker, contrary to the members across the way who dissolved this committee in 2006. So we have reinstated this advisory council, and we want to enhance the quality and accessibility of service for disabled persons and their families.
That's the consolation. The government says to people with diabetes, you lost your $1,500 tax credit, but that's okay. We gave you a committee instead. Mr. Speaker, that minister's office said the CRA has not changed its decision-making process with regards to the disability tax credit eligibility criteria. Now we have an internal memo that was sent from senior officials in her department to 51 other officials that says that people with diabetes are now excluded. Why did she mislead the House in that matter?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians will get those credits to which they are entitled. There was an increase in the number of approvals of these credits. They have increased by 20% between 2014 and 2016. We brought in measures to make these credits more accessible, and our efforts are bearing fruit. We have allowed these super nurses to fill out the forms. We are working for the most vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
Quote, there have not been any changes to the way the law is interpreted. She also said the rules are the same and apply just as they always have. We now know through an internal document released by ATIP today, internal CRA memos sent to dozens of officials, urged those officials to reject all diabetics for the tax credit except in exceptional circumstances. Why did this minister mislead the House?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government is trying to help the most vulnerable Canadians. In 2015-2016, our government invested more than $41 million in diabetes research. In 2017, we invested $5 million to help young people with mental disease issues. We've also been making access to credits, disability credits, better, and we're working to help the most vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
51 different officials in her department, the top decision makers, indicated that except for rare circumstances, diabetics were to be rejected every time. That minister denied the existence of any change in the practice or the policy. We now know that that was not true. She stated in this House falsehoods, and her department has raised taxes on the most vulnerable people in the country. Why?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians should receive those credits to which they are entitled. No change was made to the admissibility or eligibility criteria, and I'm happy to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that there has been an increase in the number of approvals. There's been an increase of 20% between 2014 and 2016. And as I have been doing throughout my life, I'm continuing to work for the most vulnerable people. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-47 on the arms trade does not comply with either the spirit or the letter of the treaty. Now, a former human rights minister said this bill was simply inadequate. In committee, the NDP proposed 6 amendments to the bill on the basis of expert testimony. Can the minister finally listen to Canadians, accept our amendments, and correct the deficits in this legislation? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my colleague across the way will know that a committee deals with its own affairs, but we are keeping our electoral promises to comply with this trade ban. Now, this is essential to protect persons and as a member of this treaty, as a member of the G7 and NATO, we will assume our responsibilities. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker.
Bombing campaign of Yemen and its merciless blockade has killed thousands and left millions of people on the brink of famine. But Canada has remained silent on the role of Saudi Arabia in this conflict and continues to sell arms to that country, making it potentially complicit in the conflict. When will Canada show moral leadership and suspend the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Absolutely committed to an export control system that is rigorous, that is transparent, and that is predictable. Our government is taking steps to further strengthen the export regime. We've allocated $13 million to help Canada accede to the Arms Trade Treaty. With Bill C-47 that we just spoke of, we are moving forward on a key campaign commitment to strengthen Canada's arms control regime and accede to that treaty. C-47 will allow us to join our G7 and NATO allies by acceding to the treaty and playing a leadership role in regulating the trade of conventional arms around the world.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, we have a finance minister who's been fined by the Ethics Commissioner for having not reported his villa in France, a minister who is being investigated in another investigation for having sponsored a bill that could have benefited his own company. A minister who still refuses to disclose his assets in various numbered companies, a minister who still refuses to answer opposition questions as well as journalist questions, and above all, Mr. Speaker, a minister who has refused to resign. When will the Honourable Minister resign? Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you why. We have a Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, who has presided the fastest growth in the G7, who's presided at the increase by 600,000 jobs. Mr. Speaker, we have a minister who has brought the unemployment rate down 5%, and a finance minister, Mr. Speaker, who has also helped to reduce child poverty by 40%. It is helping senior citizens as well. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, we have a finance minister who is not respecting the mandate letter he got from his own Prime Minister, who said that they should respect both the letter and the spirit of the law. Now, this is a minister who has had to meet with the Ethics Commissioner. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've lost confidence in this minister. And this for all the stated reasons. When will the Finance Minister resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honourable Member knows, it is expected of all ministers when they accede to their positions that they'll meet with the Ethics Commissioner. But our minister went even further, and he has been serving Canadians brilliantly for 2 years. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the least one can say is that the Ethics Commissioner has to work a lot with this minister because, Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister forgot to say that he had a company in France. He introduced legislation that would benefit his company, his family company, and he sold 680,000 shares just a few days before he introduced his tax policy. So this minister is meeting. We want answers to this question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner is independent and impartial. She is fair, unlike the opposition. Now, she has been working with the Honourable Minister since the beginning, and as soon as he came to Canada, he went even further than what was necessary by putting his assets in a blind trust. Now, that's what the Finance Minister has been doing for 2 years. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, what the Minister of Finance is doing is, well, he promised to place his assets in a blind trust. He did not do so, and he created a company. He has a company which he didn't report in France. And it seems he sold 680,000 shares. Will this Finance Minister finally work in a serious way with the Ethics Commissioner? Why will the Finance Minister not say that it was he who sold these 680,000 shares? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has been working with the Ethics Commissioner. He's always done so. He said when he came to Ottawa that he would sell his shares. Now, Mr. Speaker, what are the allegations of the opposition members? He's saying that the tax measures we brought in December 2015, they were targeting the richest 1% and helping the middle class. I'm trying to understand what the opposition argument is.
This week, the Assembly of First Nations is holding their Special Chiefs Assembly, where a resolution will be presented to reject Bill C-58, the Liberals' effort to gut our Access to Information Act. And today, 5 chiefs stood with me calling on the Liberals to fix C-58 since it introduces significant new barriers for First Nations trying to access even basic information. The Liberals like to talk about how the most important relationship is with Indigenous people. So will they finally actually consult First Nations and fix this regressive bill?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, we have consulted with First Nations, and in fact, we've received suggestions that include clarification that, in fact, broad requests, particularly historical records to substantiate Indigenous claims, are in fact legitimate and consistent with the Act. Further to that, we support amendments to C-58 to strengthen the bill by making it explicit that no department can refuse a request simply because of the subject, the type of record, or the date of record is not specified. And furthermore, we've also listened, and as a result of that, the Information Commissioner will...
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Speaker, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs refuses to explain why lawyers in her department suppressed thousands of pages of police evidence that named 180 perpetrators of abuse, torture, and child rape at St. Anne's Residential School, and then had the cases thrown out. And now that they've been forced to turn over the documents, she sent her lawyers to Superior Court to block those survivors from getting new hearings. Why? Who are they protecting? Just how many survivors of St. Anne's have had their legal rights compromised and their cases thrown out because of the legal obstructions of her officials? How many?
Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be very clear with the member that we are not blocking reopening of cases. We are asking for clarification on what procedural fairness means. The adjudicators have given conflicting definitions of procedural fairness, and we are committed to ensuring justice for the victims of this dark chapter in our history.
I have Deputy Shefford.
The honourable member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, we all know that starting a business requires dedication and hard work. From hiring employees, to finding office space, to bookkeeping, business owners need to know their tax obligations to ensure that they don't receive a surprise tax bill from the Canada Revenue Agency. Can the Minister of National Revenue update this House on what the CRA is doing to support small business owners? The Honourable Minister. I'd like to thank the member for Shefford for his question and for his warm welcome in Granby today. Small businesses are important players in economic development across the country, more specifically in our regions. This morning, I was proud to announce the expansion of the liaison agent program. Small business owners will be able to receive a visit by the liaison officers to understand their tax obligations and get off on the right foot.
Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, for weeks, the Minister of Revenue has told this House that nothing has changed for type 1 diabetics applying for the disability tax credit. But we know that this is not true. This morning, Diabetes Canada produced an internal CRA email detailing a new Liberal policy to automatically deny the tax credit, including to those who have received it for years. Will this minister apologize for the misleading answers that she's given this House and reverse this heartless decision before Christmas?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians must receive the benefits they are entitled to. I'm happy to state that there was an increase in the number of approvals of this credit by 20% between 2014 and 2016. We have put in place measures to make this benefit more accessible, and these are bearing fruit. We have simplified the forms. We have enabled nurses to fill in the forms when they can't find a doctor. So no changes have been brought to the eligibility criteria for persons with disabilities, and we will continue to work for the most vulnerable Canadians.
Order. The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, is this minister even aware of what's been happening in her own department since May? For 7 months, the CRA has been denying the disability tax credit to vulnerable Canadians. And this minister just shrugs her shoulders and says nothing has changed. We know that it's not true, and the proof is right here, Mr. Speaker. Will this minister apologize for this heartless attack on type 1 diabetics and reverse this tax hike?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, our government committed to administering the measures for persons with disabilities in a fair, transparent, and accessible way. I proudly announced the restoring of the Committee for Persons with Disabilities, contrary to the Conservative government that in 2006 had abolished it, Mr. Speaker. So by restoring it, people will benefit from advice for persons with disabilities in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and we are going to continue to work for the most vulnerable Canadians as we have done since the start of our mandate. The Honourable Member for Côte-de-Beauport, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. For weeks now, the Minister has said time and time again that her government has recovered some $25 billion that escaped the Liberals and has been the case for 2 years because of tax evasion. What's worse, her own senior officials and the Assistant Deputy Commissioner have refused to confirm this amount, the amount the Minister is crowing about, without evidence. She is misleading Canadians. In light of these facts, how can we continue to have confidence in this Minister when she too is hiding the truth from us? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government is firmly committed to fighting tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. The agency has a very effective recovery process. It has been strengthened following investments of some $1 billion that we made. And we have put in place the tools that we need to be effective to deal with tax frauds. All companies and individuals affected have been advised. We are on the right track to recovering $25 billion. We have advised people, and I can assure you that
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, every day is consumed by constant vigilance and management for type 1 diabetics. Before they get into their vehicle, before they go to work, before they eat, after they eat, and before they go to bed, diabetics are consumed with knowing and managing their blood sugar. Living with diabetes is a constant struggle. This minister can say what she wants, but the diabetics I've met say that living with diabetes is 24/7. Will this minister finally do the right thing and reverse the heartless decision to refuse them their tax credit?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians are to receive the benefits and credits they are entitled to. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, all person living with a chronic disease deals with consequences on their family. I am happy, however, to say that there has been an increase by 20% in the approval rate for these benefits between 2014 and 2016. We have put measures in place. Mr. Speaker, we restored the Committee for Persons with Disabilities that will make recommendations, and we will continue to work for the most vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
Saint-Bagat.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. This government continues to lack compassion. Parents of severely disabled children are no longer receiving benefits on the pretext that their children is no longer their dependent. But it's not a choice to place a child in a specialized facility. It comes out of need, and it comes with a bill. This situation is already very difficult for parents without the government making it worse. When will this government show some compassion and pay to parents of disabled children the benefits that they are entitled to? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am committed to Canadians receiving the benefits they are entitled to, especially the most vulnerable. That is at the heart of my mandate letter. It has never been the intention of the agency to cause problems for anyone. Some people have not yet provided all of the information required for examining their file, and I would invite those people to contact the agency, Mr. Speaker, to receive assistance on their specific cases.
North Island Powell River.
Reconciliation was one of the 4 pillars included in Canada 115 celebrations. Unfortunately, the Liberals told Indigenous chef Richard Francis that sharing his traditional foods couldn't happen at a Canada 150 event. Touring the country for years sharing his traditional foods of whale and seal as a tool of reconciliation, he described this incident as exactly the type of oppression he's working to eliminate. Actions matter more than words. So if the government is serious about reconciliation, will they apologize to Chef Francis and act to honour UNDRIP?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, of course, in the context of Canada 150, we made sure to support the importance of reconciliation. We know that our history has had some wrongs, and we want to make sure that we can acknowledge them, and make sure that we all work together on the path of reconciliation. Many Indigenous communities across the country have engaged in Canada 150. Again, this morning I was there to support a great Canada 150 Indigenous project, and I really hope that all of us in this room and this House will be able to support the importance of reconciliation in the context of Canada 150. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Olebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, instead of showing leadership in condemning the horrific acts committed by ISIS, instead of acknowledging that ISIS fighters are complicit in these horrific acts, instead of bringing to justice and prosecuting any ISIS fighter returning to Canada, and instead of making security and protection of Canadians its priority, the Liberals are treating these traitors as vulnerable children and are trying to reintegrate them with financial compensation and poems. Why?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is simply wrong. Like every other civilized country, Canada has a full range of counter-terrorism tools, and we use all of them, including the Global Coalition Against Daesh, security investigation, surveillance, monitoring, intelligence gathering, lawful sharing, collection of evidence, criminal charges, prosecutions, peace bonds and public listings, the no-fly list, hoisting passports, authorized threat reduction measures, prevention initiatives to head off tragedies in advance. We need all of them, and we use all of them to keep Canadians safe.
Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
The Liberals are proposing a reintegration program and support services for returning ISIS terrorists. The Public Safety Minister says the government has identified about 250 people with links to Canada who are suspected of overseas terrorist activities, or as he's called them, terrorist travelers. 2 years ago, CSIS identified it as a major, unparalleled threat to the West, and it was warned returnees could recruit or inspire individuals in Canada and could even be planning attacks here. Mr. Speaker, doesn't the minister think it's time for the Liberals to rethink this crazy reintegration plan?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition has spent the last week deprecating Canadian security agencies on the front line, but the previous Conservative government left CSIS without clear legal protections under the criminal code. They put our security in a muddle with the Constitution. They provided no framework for dealing with data sets. They left Canada trailing behind on cyber safety. They did nothing on prevention, and they reduced the budget for our security agencies by more than $1 billion. There's no lessons to be learned from them.
I would remind the Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis that we need to be able to hear on both sides of the House, and I would invite him not to interrupt. I think that he's fully aware of the rules, especially Rule 16.
You know what, Mr. Speaker? Nobody in the last election voted for a government to protect the rights of terrorists. At least 60 people who left Canada to fight for us, to fight abroad against us, have returned home. The Prime Minister says the Liberals have ways, and I quote, of deprogramming people who want to harm our society. Well, Mr. Speaker, while our veterans wait for promised benefits, our deployed troops see their pays cut, and seniors struggle to make ends meet, why would the Liberals spend a single dime on terrorists?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is sound and fury, signifying nothing. The best experts do not agree with him. Phil Gursky, a former CSIS officer now in the private sector, said this: the previous government had an abysmal record when it came to countering violent extremism and early detection. The Conservative government didn't care. And Dr. Lauren Dawson of the University of Waterloo said this: the previous Conservative government had no interest in following up on this, so Canada is late. We're getting into the game 5 years late. That's the Conservative record. It's a mess.
Honourable Member for Don Valley North. Order.
Mr. Speaker, my riding of Don Valley North is located in the Greater Toronto area, which offer marquee destinations for tourists from China, including Niagara Falls, Casa Loma, Rouge National Urban Park, and world-class cuisine. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business and Tourism please update this House on the government's plan to tap into the Chinese tourism market?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to welcoming more visitors from China in 2018, the Canada-China Year of Tourism. Today, the Prime Minister and Minister unveiled a new logo for this amazing year to come. We have developed a strategic plan for the fast-growing Chinese market. We are working to enhance tourism marketing in China, working with Canadian tourism businesses to become China-ready, increasing air and visa access, and developing experiences that are in high demand by Chinese visitors. We will continue to develop Canada's world-class tourism industry, which creates jobs and opportunities for middle-class Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Échemins, Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He was conspicuously absent yesterday. Can you tell me what planet the Minister of Transport lives on to dare to say we can't artificially create a requirement that doesn't exist? The preserver and the protector are kaput. It's clear there's a need for a second resupply ship. Denying it is showing contempt for our men and women in uniform and compromising national security, as our government did for Asterix. When will the government put Obelix into the Navy, to the Davy Yard?
L'Honorable Ministre des Transports.
The Honourable Minister of Transport. Well, I can't not seize this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to ask my colleague where he was when the government put in place the strategy, the naval shipbuilding strategy. I can tell you, he was sitting around the cabinet table at the time, and he did nothing. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, there are many people very exasperated by the Minister of Heritage, the cultural sector, print media, many people, Liberals on her side. Everyone's calling on her to take action for our media, but she's refusing to take action. When we talk about newspapers closing down, she talks about Radio-Canada or a fund that funds magazines only. Even her colleagues, and Fred Pellerin, Boucardiouf, Alexandre Taillefer, even a former Jean Chrétien advisor is not pulling any punches with her. So can she tell us at least one thing, one solution that she plans to put in place to save print media? She's got plenty of ideas in a report that was prepared for her. Honourable Minister, we have invested $2.3 billion in the CBC, the telefilm, and in other areas, and that is creating jobs for thousands of people across the country. Not just that, we are concerned by what is happening in the print media. We know that they are facing challenges. That's why I've announced that we're going to be modernizing our approach to better ensure and support written media, whether it be in print or digital format, and we will ensure as well that we are showing leadership in this transition towards the web to ensure the viability of this industry.
We celebrate the 20th anniversary of the historic Ottawa Treaty, banning the use of anti-personnel landmines. Because of Canada's leadership, there are now 162 states party to the treaty. 28 countries have been declared mine-free, and over 48 million stockpiled landmines in 88 countries have been destroyed. Cependant,
However, some work remains to be done. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs inform the House of the measures Canada intends to take to rid the world of anti-personnel landmines? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I want to thank the member for Ottawa West Nepean for her question, and I wanted to say that we had leadership under Lloyd Axworthy on this file, and we continue to be leaders.
Since December 3rd, 1997, when the Ottawa Treaty was signed, including the destruction of 51 million landmines worldwide. And just today, our minister announced $12 million to pursue Canada's goal of ridding the world of landmines. Nous restons prêts à travailler.
We've remained prepared to work with our international partners to continue to defend the world, a mine-free world.
Despite promising not to do so in the last election, these Liberals continue to fight our veterans in court. Today, in the Equitas case, the BC Court of Appeal ruled against veterans. Does the Prime Minister regret breaking his promise not to take our veterans back to court.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we value the significant contributions that veterans and Canadian Armed Forces members have made and continue to make in protecting Canadians and their peace and security at home and around the world. Regardless of the results of this case, we remain and are committed to bringing a pension for life option, and that is what we will do. We need to deliver the right option for a lifelong benefit for ill and injured veterans. We took the time to get it right, including consulting with veterans, some of whom are involved with the Equitas Society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, the government's missing the boat on the Davie file. 800 jobs are in jeopardy between now and Christmas in the Quebec City region, and not a single minister had the heart to go and meet with the workers. 800 jobs is worth 5 minutes of your time, and the time is right because there are union representatives here today in Ottawa. Will the Minister of Public Works, the Minister of Defence, the Minister of Transport can show some respect and accept to meet with these workers, the workers who are here today? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned by the possibility of job losses on workers and their families. We acknowledge the excellent work that was done on asterisks. Our government has been in contact with the shipyard, and I can assure you that we are very aware of the situation, my colleague and I. The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, Irving can't deliver a single ship with the $63 million in contracts from the federal government, but the federal government gives it preferential treatment. Today we're being asked to adopt $54 million in additional votes to absorb the cost overruns by Irving at a time when 800 workers at Davie are going to be losing their job because there aren't any contracts. So Ottawa is compensating another shipyard that's too costly and can't deliver the goods. If this isn't favoritism, then what is it? Can she, or the minister, or another minister take 5 minutes? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government has to provide the Coast Guard and the RCMP with the ships they need to protect Canadians. Our strategy is a long-term commitment, and we will be supporting the industry and creating jobs across the country. This strategy has contributed significant funds and 7,000 jobs. We monitor the shipyards to ensure that they are meeting the requirements of the strategy when it comes to jobs and spin-offs. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, through the member for Louis Hébert, the Liberal government has misled Canadians. The Ethics Commissioner couldn't give her blessing to a payback of some $70,000 in Papineau. The report by the CEO wasn't even available. And members of this government knew that full well. Will the Prime Minister apologize for, once again, having taken people for fools?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. These assertions are entirely false, as confirmed by the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. Not only that, but the Liberal Party has moved forward with the strongest standards in federal politics for openness and transparency, including facilitating media coverage, advanced postings in public accessible spaces, and timely reporting of events, details, and guest lists, Mr. Speaker. In contrast that to opposition parties who continue to organize their fundraising events in secret, barring journalists and hiding details about who is attending their closed-door events. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Allard.
Order. I would like to point out a presence in the gallery of Her Excellency, Minister of the Status of Women and Rights of Women from the Haiti Republic.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge is rising on a point of order.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Misleading the House is a serious matter that I know that no member would do deliberately. So today, the Minister of National Revenue again claimed that there had been no changes to the disability tax credit. I have in my hand a copy of an email obtained through an access to information request, which contradicts the statements that this minister has made today and in the past, and I ask unanimous consent to table this document.
Is unanimous consent? No, there is no unanimous consent.
The honourable member for Longueuil is riding on a point of order.
Response to a point of order made earlier today by the member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman. In May, the member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman publicly made inappropriate, humiliating, and unwanted comments to me that were sexual in nature. These comments have caused me great stress and have negatively affected my work environment. Thank you.